The COYGIG Pod on OTB Sports, in association with Cadbury. A player and a half deserves a glass and a half of support.
Top pocket goal!
It's what dreams are made of.
They are going to the World Cup Finals!
Hello and welcome back to the latest episode of the award-winning COYGIG podcast. Yes, in case you missed it on Friday, COYGIG was named the best podcast of the 2022 Digital Media Awards. So of course, I have to lead with that straight off the bat. Anyone who heard me on Off the Ball, Pat Kenny, or this podcast today will know that my voice is still slightly dead from Friday night and celebrating it. I do think I sound slightly worse than I did after we won the World Cup, but we won't. That was because that was on a Friday night and the World Cup qualification was middle of the week. But just want to say at the top of the show, thank you to everyone who listened to us over the past year. There is no way we would have won this award without everyone listening along and interacting with the podcast. And the podcast especially wouldn't be what it is without our producer, Catherine Murphy, who you never get to see, but is always running the show and especially keeping us all on time and making sure that we don't ramble off.
It's a harder task than you'd think, to be fair.
Shocking that a load of big mouths like us can't just keep on time and not make this podcast about 5 hours long. And then of course there is Emma Carroll, who offers us our expert team of the weeks, and the daring duo of former internationals, Emma Byrne and Karen Duggan, who provide their insight every single week and answer all my silly questions about the WSL. So a big round of applause for the entire team on what is a really nice accomplishment. And it's nice to know that we're not just chatting random stuff. Other people actually think we're doing a good job.
Yeah. Who would have thought? Who would have thought, huh?
Hello, Karen. Just
Sorry, do you want us to comment on that? Congratulations to all. It was very well deserved. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, myself and Emma Carroll, I should specify, were at the awards on Friday, so we got to kind of bask in the champagne glow of the whole thing. But Karen, did you do anything nice to celebrate? Did you raise a cup of tea to us when you went home?
I sure did. Me and Bernie Duggan had a right cup of tea together, a big strong cup. So it was we made sure we marked it all right, because it was lovely. I couldn't believe it when you sent the message in, sent the picture in. It's a lovely acknowledgement, kind of caps off kind of everyone's labor of love that this has been. So it was great.
It was a very dangerous point of the night to win an award, because it was towards the end. Everything was kind of in your head. You're like, oh yeah, wrapping up now, head home soon. And then won the award.
An Oscar-esque speech, or
did you have to make a speech that late on after champagne and wine?
No, thankfully not. We just had to go up on stage to take a picture, which I haven't seen yet, but I imagine was slightly googly-eyed.
If it was me and Emma, that I'm not sure we wouldn't
have made it. We wouldn't have made it up those steps, I don't think.
Well, I was kind of like half in shock whenever they announced her name, because I wasn't expecting it. Because I'd actually met one of the judges outside before our award, and he was kind of like hinting that we hadn't won, so I just had it in my head that we hadn't won and I wasn't going to have to do anything.
Oh, you just coincidentally met one of the judges.
Just for the handover of the brown envelope.
You changed his mind.
And so then whenever they announced her name, everyone else kind of got up and I was just still sitting there in a bit of a daze, smiling, and Emma Carroll had to kind of grab my arm and be like, Kathleen, come on, we have to actually go up and get the award now. But no, it was really nice. And I think especially this is, with everything that's happened this year, it's also just another nice way to top it all off.
Yes.
And we'll have our COYGIG celebration sometime soon to.
Oh, you keep promising
when we all meet each other in real life.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I thought this was going to be the night, Karen, that we would finally do it. We'd meet in real life. We'd win an award. I mean, it would be the best night ever. And then you let me down and went back to Kilkenny, but it's fine. I'm over it.
Sorry. Well, like I said, it's off season now, so the weekends fill up fast, and this was unfortunately.
You get all your socializing in as quick as you can.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, we did have a match tonight to talk about, so it's not all just talking about how many glasses of champagne Kathleen had.
No, I think we should go back to that rather than the match, to be honest.
We need to get like Emma Carroll on, and instead of doing like a team of the week, she can do an assessment of Kathleen's evening.
Yeah.
That's just like my friends, basically, the morning after. They just run down everything that happened, which is the worst thing that can happen the next day. You definitely don't need reminders. No, thank you.
No, I don't think so. Although, and like there were like, it was a work event as well, technically. So, you know, you kind of have to.
Networking, isn't that what they call it these days?
Yeah, that's what they call it.
Right.
It was funny as well. We did feel a bit like the riffraff journos because everyone else was like media heads and like marketing and all that sort of thing. And they were all very glam. And I was just like, yes, I'm very out of place in the middle of all this.
No,
Never.
you're not. You're an award-winning journalist. Come on.
Thank you, Karen. I think that's the nicest thing you've ever said to me.
It is. You know, that's it for a year. Come on.
I'll take it, to be honest. I can clip this and keep playing it to make myself feel better. The COYGIG Pod and OTB Sports is an association with Cadbury FC, official snack partner to Republic of Ireland women's national team. So like we said, this week was an international window, so we won't have any WSL chat at the end of the podcast, but we are going to be talking about ACL injuries, which is something that we have talked about a lot on the podcast. We, especially during the Euros, Karen, myself and you cried over the various players that got ACL injuries and kept them out of the tournament. But before we do that, we want to look a little bit at Ireland versus Morocco, which literally just the final whistle just went as I logged onto the Zoom. So no better timing, fresh reaction. The two teams did meet on Friday, and that was a 2-2 draw and a kind of behind closed doors match, which wasn't really publicized all that much. I mean, all I know is that we went 2-0 up and then it was a 2-2 draw. It was a shadow squad. Tonight, more of a normal squad, more of the sort of players you would expect, even if the formation was the thing that certain members of this podcast are not that happy with.
Well, the problem was that we did expect this formation. I thought we might see something different for once, but no.
Well, it was a 4-0 win, which was good because we went 2-0 up in the first like 16 minutes ish, and I fully expected us to kind of push on from there. And then for about an hour or so, it looked like we weren't going, well, maybe not an hour, it was probably like 45 minutes. It didn't look like we were actually going to push on, and it was a bit nerve-wracking at times. How did you guys feel tonight went?
I just think, you know, you're expecting more every time, you're expecting more, and I just feel like you kind of get the same thing again, especially against a team like Morocco, who didn't do too badly. And actually I thought they were very well set up tactically, and they just didn't have the quality. But regarding our girls, again, same story about, you know, those three at the back marking one player, no need to sit back so deep. Then you've got the two, are they wing backs? I don't know. It's the biggest question. Let's call them wing backs. In Megan Campbell sitting right back, and Katie sitting on her toes, which why do we need Katie back there when they're playing one up front? I don't understand. And whatever's coming from the sideline, me as a player, I do not want Katie sitting right in front of me. I want to push her up the pitch. Number one, because she's better higher up the pitch. And number two, I want that space to go higher. So in general, I just think it was a great opportunity for our fullbacks, Jamie Finn and Megan Campbell in the first half, to play as that wing back position and go higher, because we'd literally no width with them because they were sitting back. Kind of changed a little bit though, I think. I really like Kyra Carusa. I just really, really like her. I think she should be playing more. I think she should be given a chance, because when she comes on the pitch, the dynamics change a little bit. You know, she's going to hold the ball up, which is encouraging for our wide players to go a little bit higher, which they did just towards the end of the second half there. And we just look like a more attacking team, a better team, and it just looks normal for us to have higher players on the pitch. But yeah, I thought nice subs. Lily Ag did very well. Again, more impressive the more I see her. I think obviously Denise is a class player. Some interesting performances for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
smiling and nodding.
Yeah,
there.
the odd time that we did get a switch on the play out to the wing back, there was so much space there to exploit, and it should have been something that was obvious. We should have played the ball around in the middle a little bit more. I agree with Emma. We're too quick to drop off 3v1, and that's been a problem that we actually stopped against Scotland, because Niamh Fahey stepped in to stop Caroline Weir. So we identified that the 10 was the threat. So we need to assume that the 10 is the threat more often and just be braver in those situations, because we've three of the most experienced centre backs in any international team, flanked by the likes of Megan Campbell and Jamie Finn, who are well able. I think possibly today it was the first time I probably saw them were missing maybe a Megan Connolly. I think she holds that position better and just kind of acts as that pivot. I think Lily Ag is really good on the ball, but she wants to get forward. She wants to get involved in those plays. And I think that she's really, really good at that. So they are missing Megan. I think she'll be a great one to get back in. And obviously Heather Payne's to come back, hopefully Leanne Kiernan as well. But I agree, I'd like to see more of Kyra, and would have liked to have seen her earlier, possibly in the game as well, just to change the dynamic a little bit. Because like you say, she does just link up the play very, very well, and she can run off the shoulder as well, and she can be a target player. I do think she's quite well rounded, and it would be nice to see more of her, because we're going to be running Heather Payne into the ground again. We're going to need a different option, and she just allows us to switch up from that long ball play the whole time. Which encourages us to get forward.
And of course, get her goal as well on her 27th.
Oh, what a goal. What a goal, by the way.
Yeah.
One player I do want to ask you both about who made her 100th cap today is Louise Quinn. An absolute stalwart of the game, and there was some really, really nice pieces around the place today talking about her, which everyone should definitely check out. But I want to ask you guys for either your best Louise Quinn story or like a best moment that you've had with her where you were just like, this is someone who is a great person.
You could have given us a heads up there, Kathleen. I mean, we do have a group chat. Just text us before.
Just the first thing that pops into your mind. It doesn't have to be the greatest thing ever. But I think like a lot of the pieces today were people like myself, maybe, who've watched her play, and I know what she means to me in that context, or her giving interviews and talking about her career. But as people who've played alongside her and know her, it's just interesting to get your perspective on it.
I mean, Louise, she's a great girl. She's just a great girl to have around the camp. She's very relaxed and she mixes well with everyone. And then she's just great to have on the pitch, because there's nobody in the world better than her in the air. And it's, you know, we'd have a laugh about it, because she'd come off the pitch after heading the ball about 150 times, and she would win the ball 150 times. And, you know, she's just a great girl to have around. Really good personality, really good professional, worked really hard to get in the shape that she's in, which is a very good shape, and just very humble, you know, coming into the dressing room, good for the younger players. In general, just a really sound girl.
Yeah.
I'd have to say.
No, yeah, I'd echo that. I mean, anyone new who comes into the squad, she'd be the first person over, making them welcome and things like that. And like you say, she kind of has a calm demeanor, and she's good rapport with everyone. And for a while there, she was like our Shane Duffy. She was like the only one who could put the ball in the net. So she's popped up at really, really important moments with goals. But it has been her defensive qualities. We like you say, when those balls are getting peppered into the box and your backs are against the wall, she's the one who steps up and puts her body on the line. We've seen her wearing masks, we've seen black eyes, broken noses. I'd say we've seen it all from Louise. So I'm delighted that she's getting the praise that she is this week, because it's well deserved.
Today, the first senior goal she's actually scored that wasn't with her head. I read somewhere today that everything she scored is a header.
I don't think so. I think
not surprised me.
I think she's had a couple unusual goals, like just like she's headed it originally and then it's dropped to her and then she's scored.
Maybe it was the first. I think maybe the thing was that every goal she has used her head in some capacity.
I would believe.
Yeah,
and she's always one of the last women standing. However way you want to take that, you can take it as you will. Respect for that.
See, that's the little nugget of gold that we were all looking for. Well, thank you both very much for that analysis. We will obviously be back with WSL chat next week, but coming up next in the podcast, we talk to Professor Joanne Parsons about women's ACL injuries, how they're caused, and what we can do to prevent them a little bit more. The issues of ACL injuries in women's football has long been an issue, but particularly in the last year or so, we have seen some very high-profile players like Alexia Putellas, Marie Antoinette Katoto, Kristen Press, Kat Macario, Jennifer Marajan, Ellie Carpenter, Carpenter, Adi Hergerberg. I could keep going on. And then even our very own Jess Zhu suffering from them. It has been in the headlines more than ever as a result. And we have talked about it on this podcast many times. And today we decided to take a bit of a look behind the headlines, ask why is this injury just so prevalent, and are there more things that we could be doing to prevent them in women's football? Now, I like to think that the three of us know a lot, but we don't know everything. So we've asked for some expert help this week to dissect what is actually going on with this injury crisis. And joining us is Professor Joanne Parsons, who works at the University of Manitoba in the US. Her research looks at the use of resistance training activities to maximize health and performance, as well as decrease injury risk across diverse populations. And one of her areas of study has been ACL injuries in women. Joanne, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. I will just say one thing. I'm in Canada, not the US.
Oh, sorry, in Canada. Sorry.
Yeah.
God,
Canadian, not American.
That's a very bad faux pas on my part. I
That's
do
okay.
Good start, Kathleen.
I thought I was doing so well too. What can I say? I do apologize deeply.
That's no problem.
So I suppose just to give our listeners a bit of an insight into your research and what exactly in the area of preventing ACLs you look at.
Sure. So I'm a physiotherapist by background. So I come from a clinical perspective. I worked for probably about 6 years in the clinic, treating sports-related injuries. And so when I went into my master's and my PhD, I was really interested in looking at the effect of exercise training programs on ACL injury risk, and especially in young women and girls. I am a big proponent of prevention. And so the earlier we can intervene, the better. And so I was working with girls as young as 9 years old and getting them to do some preventative exercise training in my work. And then I kind of, alongside that, did some work with another colleague of mine on the weight room and how girls and women perceive the weight room, how uncomfortable they feel in there a lot of times, and how that relates to injury prevention, because strengthening is a really important part of exercise training for injury prevention. But if they can't go into the weight room and feel comfortable there, then what's the point? And so doing that, I read a lot more about ACL injuries, and of course, over the years and years, and I kind of got tired of seeing that women were biologically more susceptible. That's basically how it's been approached to this point. And so now I'm still very interested in exercise training, but now for ACL injury prevention, but now I'm looking a little bit more into the bigger picture and like the social influences on ACL injury risk.
Yeah, because I thought it was interesting over the weekend. There was an article about ACL injuries, and you actually sent it to me earlier today, and I'd already seen it over the weekend because everyone on my timeline was talking about it. And I thought it was interesting. You had quote tweeted it and just said, after 30 years, tens of thousands of research publications, and no change in ACL injury rates, the focus on anatomy and hormones as the primary causes of ACL injuries needs to shift. And I was reading some of your papers, and I found it really interesting, something I didn't realize, that the rates for men had actually decreased and general population were decreasing, but they weren't for women. So I was like, well, that kind of takes the focus away from everything I thought I knew about ACL injuries, which was women were just more likely to get them. And we don't know what the reason is. It must be something biological or whatever it is. Right. Can you talk a little bit about, I suppose, that research that you've done into, I know you mentioned it there, but the weight training, the resistance training, the fact that young girls might find it more difficult to go into a gym or be more intimidated by that?
Yeah, so it is interesting. I'll just go back to something you said there about the injury rates. It is interesting that every population is a little bit different, whether you're looking at general population, the age of athletes, whether they're recreational or elite athletes, everyone has a slightly different injury risk. But yes, it is true that men's rates have either stayed the same or gone down, whereas women's have stayed the same or in many cases gone up over the last 20, 30 years. So it is very concerning. So yeah, the research paper that we came out with last year basically suggests that there's 4 different we call them environments in sport where gender might be influencing ACL injury risk. So pre-sport, training, competition, and then in rehabilitation or treatment. And so we suggest that it starts early. Really, it starts when we're born, right? It starts with parents and family and friends giving kids gender-specific toys, right? Dolls for girls, active tools and cars for boys, right? Pink for girls, boys get blue. So those types of gendered types of clothing, activities, and toys. So it starts really early. Even the types of sports that girls can play, as far as what's available to them, that starts even, pre-competitive sport anyway. Some things are just not available. When I grew up, there was no girls ice hockey in my part of Canada. I would have loved to play ice hockey, but there was just no girls teams. It was just boys. So some of that plays into our opportunities for development of different motor skills and different abilities, and which can carry through our whole sport life, really. And that starts even, like you mentioned, with the weight room. I mean, it's very common in boys' sports to get them into the weight room early, right? They're doing what we call dry land training or in the weight room on a regular basis, as well as their sport training. With girls, that's not as common, certainly not at as young of age as boys go in there generally. And I think that's a whole bunch of things. I think it's beliefs perhaps of coaches and parents of athletes themselves, whether they believe that that's something that's valuable to them as an athlete. But I also think it's a lot of the environment that we have set up for kids. Weight rooms especially are very masculine spaces that are often not welcoming to anyone who doesn't kind of prescribe to that, the football masculinity, and so girls are just not as likely to go in there. I've done focus groups and interviews with high school girls, and they're like the comments they come up with are quite jarring, really. It's, you feel like one of the quotes was, you feel like a model on a catwalk, and not in a good way, right? You feel judged and people are looking at you, judging you that you shouldn't be in there, that you don't know what you're doing. They described instances of where boys would actually take over their spaces. They had, a girl had a barbell set up to do some sort of exercise, and the boy would come in and actually take over the space and take the weights. And so those are the kinds of things that we're dealing with, and we need to change systemically, not just, once you reach competitive or elite sport. That needs to start early.
And when you're looking at these things and looking at it in the elite context compared to say maybe the grassroots or people just training on their own, is that something then that feeds into coaching practice and rehab practice? And even you talked in the paper about, and you mentioned it there as well, about these things starting early days, where the care given to women at before and after an ACL injury is sometimes different to men. And I was reading that and I was I wonder, does that kind of feed into the studies that we see that says women are less likely to be taken seriously by a medical professional if they say something hurts, or a Black woman is even more likely to not be taken seriously, or a woman of color. So depending on which group you come from, you're less and less likely. Does that feed into what you're looking at as well?
Absolutely. And that's the thing that's really interesting, is that what we're suggesting about ACL injury really can be applied across many sports injuries. So concussion, women suffer concussions more often, ankle sprains as well. And across medicine, like you mentioned, there's a lot of research that suggests that women don't get offered surgery as often, cardiac surgery. Their heart attacks are not recognized in women as quickly as in men. They're not treated the same way. And so ACL, and there's some preliminary research that shows that that's the same way. Girls and women are not offered ACL surgery as often as boys or men. Now, we know we don't always need surgery, but if they're not receiving the same options, why is that? I mean, it's certainly not because they have, XX chromosomes. It's something else is at play. And I think it's important to say too, specifically, that often, most times, this is not a purposeful slight for girls or women. Like, often it's not. It's just kind of these implicit biases and ways of doing things that we've done for years and years and decades. And no one ever kind of just steps back and says, what are we doing and why are we doing it? And can we do something better that's not going to disadvantage, half the population, basically?
Emma and Karen, you've obviously been in these professional environments, and like even now, if Emma, like you're not still playing, but you're still in contact with a lot of people who are. How have you seen any difference in how ACLs are treated, or like attitudes toward them, or even an increase? Because I know, Emma, we were talking about this last week, and you talked, or maybe this week before, you talked about how feeling there's been an explosion in these sort of injuries over the last couple of years.
Yeah, for sure. It's incredible what you're saying, Joanne. I'm really shocked at some of this stuff, by the way. There's a huge number of ACL injuries within the Women's Super League here in England and in the league in Spain. I know in Spain, they're moving out of the weight room. They don't do weights. For example, Barca football club, they don't go into the gym to do weights. They don't agree with it anymore. They go and they do their training on the pitch, and it's all impact training on the pitch and resistance more than anything. But the men's team, they don't suffer ACLs, but the women's do. So how do we differ from the men's team? Because they do the same training. Now they're doing the same training out of the gym. And what's the difference with the women and the men?
Yeah, I wish I had that answer, right? This is the problem. Like, it's such a complex problem. And this was part of the discussion on the weekend over Twitter. Was a lot of the attention has gone straight to biology, right? This biological approach that we have different anatomy than men. We have different physiology. Our, muscle timing is different. Our the bony notches where the ligament sits are smaller. Hormones is always a big part of it, because women are often, whenever there's anything wrong with a woman, it's often goes straight to hormones, which is problematic, right? It kind of sets up this stereotype that it's automatically hormones. So those things, there's definitely some of that at play. There's no question about that, but there's so many other different things. So it's your training age. What age did you start playing soccer? Sorry, I call soccer football at. Were you a multi-sport athlete? Do you have those skills from other sports that you can now apply?
That's actually something I wanted to ask you about, because I'd be a big proponent of playing multiple sports as a kid, and I read somewhere that you're not putting the same stresses through the same parts of your body. If you do that, you kind of develop different areas of your body because you're doing different movements. Have you seen that, or would you agree with that? Because I know people are being asked to specialize earlier and earlier now, because it does develop their skill set, but does it have a physiological impact if they do that?
Absolutely. The research suggests that specializing very early is not a good thing for your physical development. And it makes sense, right? We want to develop all different kinds of physical abilities and performance abilities. And so just by doing one thing, yes, your skills, that your skill in that sport might be increased, but your physical prowess maybe is not developed to its as diverse as it could be. And then you risk burnout, right? You specialize kids too early, and by the time they're 12, it's like, I'm sick of playing soccer 12 months a year. Let's do something different, right? So it absolutely, specializing, that another risk factor. I always picture ACL injury risk as a whole bunch of circles with interconnecting arrows, and each one of those circles has something. So hormones, anatomy, muscle firing timing, training age, early specialization, and they all interconnect. And on any given day, this is the thing that makes it so frustrating, is that on any given day, some of those risk factors are more important than others, right? Whether it's fatigue level, whether it's stress level, how much sleep the athlete got the night before, were they just on a plane for 12 hours traveling from somewhere and now they're on a different turf than they were used to at home. So, and they're in a different pair of shoes. So you can see how all these different things are interplaying to cause an ACL injury. And for the majority of the time, they don't cause an ACL injury, right? We have lots of women play and don't ever suffer an injury. But on those certain days, all those things line up for a certain athlete. And then that's when the injury happens. And that's what the challenge and the frustration of trying to tease out this problem is that it is very complex. So we cannot just say it's anatomy and hormones, right? It's all these things that interconnect.
Do you think you will, or anybody will come up with anything? Because this is a major problem. And it's funny you say that, because when I was playing, I always knew when I was weaker in training, whether it's when I was tired or my menstrual cycle or whatever it was, I could feel just weaker, whether it's ligaments or I dislocate. Every time I dislocated something or did my cruciate, it was because I was really tired for different reasons.
Right.
But I could feel
absolutely. And yes, I mean, I think we certainly know a lot more than we did 30 years ago. I mean, there's we know that
it was actually more than 30 years ago. You mention it. Yes.
Yeah. So we have, there's programs like the FIFA 11 plus prevention program. We know that if girls especially do those, girls and young women do those programs, they can decrease their ACL injury risk by like 60%, 60%. So it's huge. So there's that part of that we know how to prevent them in one way, as in, if you do this, you have a really reduced risk. But then the problem is implementing those programs. Lots of soccer coaches don't want to they take too much time. I want to spend the time on the skills rather than general fitness training.
Joanne, does go into the FIFA 11 plus program, just for like, say, our listeners who may have never heard of it before?
Sure. And they can Google it. You can find it all over anywhere. There's running drills that kind of increase in difficulty levels so that by the end of the running drills, you're kind of like running and jumping and bumping into your partner, but then landing back down again in like a good position with nice bent knees and in a controlled manner. So there's those kind of things. Then in the middle of those running drills, there are things like squats and planks, abdominal exercises, lunges. I'm trying to remember, but kind of strength and balance focused. So it's a variety of these things, but in previous research has shown that strength training is key to injury prevention. So of all the things like flexibility training, balance training, strength training is one of those key things that needs to be included for it to be successful, as well as that balance proprioception is another part that's really needs to be included.
Yeah, because I know some managers, like say Barcelona there, I know some managers are they're turning against the gym and stuff, and it's obviously just finding the right balance between the two. And yeah, I think people blame heavy weights and things like that, but again, I suppose it's balancing your load and things like that.
Absolutely. And it'd be interesting to know that you're talking about Spain and how they're not, men's and women's teams are not being in the gym anymore.
Sorry, John, this is what I was going to say. I think the problem is that we just tend to follow what the men are doing, and perhaps that's the problem. We need our own individual specific training because we are different. Like that is.
Well, and I was gonna say, like, it'd be interesting to know what the training history of the men on those teams is. Like, if they've already been weight training or some sort of resistance training for 10 years by the time they're at that level. The women's team, maybe they've only been doing it for 5 years previously, right? But so they're not equal, they're not the same at this point. So you can't just say, well, now we're going to do the same thing because it's fine. It'll work for both because you don't have the same history going into it. So that would be really interesting. Yeah. I mean, I from all the research that I've seen, is strength is imperative. You have to have a good baseline strength and I mean, that makes sense for performance too, right? I mean, you can't be a good performer and perform well at your sport without a baseline amount of strength either.
Yeah. And just another non-gender specific thing, we mentioned someone changing turf that they're on. Have you seen Is it the changing between two different grounds that you've seen major problems in, or is it the AstroTurf or boggy pitches, we'll say, or is it, I think it's probably the change.
You might have to explain that one.
Sorry.
I'm assuming that means wet.
Yes.
You don't actually, okay.
The very Irish term for like a very wet, muddy pitch.
That's a great question. I know that it's not my area of specialty, so I'm not 100% on the most recent research, but I certainly know that artificial turf can be more risky than natural turf, for sure. And then it's not just the turf itself, it's the interface between the turf and the cleats as well. So what type of cleats are on the shoe, that makes a big difference as well. So, and then weather makes a difference. Is it wet? Is it dry? You know, that kind of thing. So, or is it snowy like it is here in Manitoba right now? So those things are all definitely increased risk, and certainly artificial turf is particularly risky, I believe.
And I think they've kind of done away with the blade boots now, because they were just the finger was being pointed at them for a while for a lot of injuries, so they're gone. So now we have to find something else to blame.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing, right? It's like, oh, if we fix this one thing, it's just going to fix everything. Well, it has to be bigger than that. You can't just monitor hormones and pretend that changing that is going to fix the problem. It's much bigger than that.
Yeah, well, again, that's something we can't change, so it's going to have to be things like your FIFA 11 program and things like that, building up the right strengths to counteract whatever weaknesses we might have or laxes because our hormone changes throughout a month.
Yeah, and we haven't even mentioned gendered responsibilities outside of sport, right? So women shoulder more of the non-paid work at home. So we do more of the housework, childcare, other types of care. And so if women are using their time to do those kinds of things, whereas men don't have to do that as often, they have more time to train. They have more time to rehabilitate from an injury. They have the resources, right? Women are not paid the same as men, right? And so even things like that, they don't have, women's teams are more likely to have volunteer medical staff versus the men's team have paid experts. So there's all those things that feed into it too, that are different, not because we have XX chromosomes, it's because of gendered related expectations, beliefs, rules, or whatever.
So if you would, for the next couple of years, like to see a direction that this research would go in, is it looking at it in a kind of, I don't know if interdisciplinary is kind of the right word, but say taking all those circles that you mentioned before and putting all those people into a team and saying, okay, you're gonna study the stuff that you know, and then we're all gonna come together and see how these things interact. Is that kind of the way forwards that you're advocating for at the moment?
Absolutely. And we've started that. Dr. Becker and Dr. Cohen that I wrote that paper with last year, they're like, I'm a physiotherapist clinician. Steph Cohen is a health geographer. So she looks at how environments affect health and healthy behaviors. And then Cherie Becker is a social scientist and looks at kind of the safety in sport. And so we come from very diverse backgrounds. And we have some projects planned. We're just waiting to hear that we have funding for them. That's the big thing, right? And that's a whole nother thing we could talk about is, research funding for women's sport is not as prevalent and as not as common. So we are planning some projects, and we are going to be looking at those bigger environmental, social kind of influences that we think might be influencing injury risk. But ultimately, yes, we need to team up with the folks who are looking at hormone levels and the folks who are looking at biomechanics and try to figure it all out and come up with the best solution that we can. I mean, we're never going to prevent all injuries, of course. Injuries sometimes are accidents, they just happen, and we're not going to prevent that. But hopefully we can improve things better than they have been.
Another interesting thing just that I've seen is now people opting not to get the surgery.
Yes.
And going down the non-surgical route. I don't know if you have an opinion on that or if you have any more information on that for people, because I think people assume, oh, when is your surgery? But it's not always the option taken now.
No, and it actually is going a bit more that way now, that, finding that the ACL can actually repair itself in some cases. And so that the ends will find each other and kind of repair itself on its own without surgery. That won't happen in every case, but I think it's a balance, and it's a discussion between your healthcare professionals and yourself and your parents, if you're a 14-year-old or something. But there are risks associated with surgery, right? There's always the general health risks, but also just doing a reconstruction. You have to take a graft from somewhere, right? So you're taking a previously healthy quadricep tendon or a hamstring tendon and taking a piece of it and putting that in as the new ACL, but now you've created a new injury. And there's lots of research to show that quad or hamstring that has been used as a graft site doesn't come back to its pre-operative state, and that makes sense. Now it's you're missing a part of it. So there's that part of it that you need to consider with rehabilitation. So I think some people think that I'll have the surgery, it's quicker, I'll be back quicker, but that is not the case. If you go back anywhere before about 9 months, you're really at higher risk of re-injury. And so you need that extended period of time anyway, regardless of whether you have the surgery.
Well, Joanne, thank you so much for your time. I know I learned a lot this evening, and I'm pretty sure everyone listening along did as well. This is obviously an issue that we are very interested on the podcast because, as we've said tonight, it's not like it's going to be solved anytime soon, and it does need to be kept talking about so that hopefully more funding is put into it and we see less of these injuries, because at the end of the day, not only do the players not benefit, us as fans of sport don't benefit either, because we lose out on seeing some of the most talented people out there. So thank you so much for your time, Joanne. Really
thank you for having me.
Great.
Thank you.
We just wanted to remind you of a competition that we are running before we wrap up the show. Thanks to our partners at Cadbury, we're supporting Irish women's grassroots football, and we're giving away all the net profits from our most recent Cadbury Roadshow in Vicar Street. We're giving you the opportunity to win €1,000 worth of equipment for your local grassroots adult club. And it's so simple to win. All you have to do to be in its chance is contact us with your club details and contact information at the COYGIG Pod at offtheball.com. Terms and conditions apply. Head over to otbsports.com for more. Emma, Karen, and myself, and Emma Carroll will all be back next week with the WSL back in action after the international break. And yeah, we can't wait to see you guys all then. We'll be back with more award-winning content, which I just will not tire for saying for the next while. Thank you, and see you all again next week.
The COYGIG Pod on OTB Sports in association with Cadbury. A player and a half deserves a glass and a half of support.